The object before us is, in a word, a contradiction. It has broken barriers and defied stereotypes, centuries of history and thousands of miles of collective journeying, all locked tight in ivory and clasped with gold. Made on an island just off the coast of Italy, this object combines stylings from the far reaches of the Islamic world and materials from the heart of Africa. In our modern globalized society, we often joke offhand about the world getting smaller every day. But cultural exchange and commercial interconnectedness are older phenomena than you may realize. To discover the origins of our global community, we must return to the high Middle Ages of the Mediterranean, to when the world was large and treacherous, and what would today be handled by shipping liners was endeavored upon by teams of traders hauling their goods and their cultures across the vast Sahara sands. Today, we answer the question, what secrets are locked in the ivory casket of Sicily, and what connection does it hold with the Sahel merchants, the African caravans of gold? My name is Ian Gould. This podcast has been produced as part of the Georgetown University Premodern Worlds Podcast project. The object before us is a small rectangular box, commonly referred to as a casket, constructed out of ivory. The casket dates back to 12th century Sicily, and though its ivory fastenings have chipped a bit and its decorations of gold inlay have somewhat faded, it remains in remarkably good condition. Gracing the smooth surface of the casket is a great deal of gold inlay and painted decorations, and an ornate locking mechanism constructed of gilded brass. The most appropriate term to describe the casket's visual appearance would be geometric. It was constructed to mathematical perfection, with straight, smooth sides, a truncated pyramid lid, and perfect symmetry from every angle. The gilded brass lock mechanism reaches gracefully over the lid, perfectly bisecting the box perpendicular to its equally gilded hinges. 4 identical designs are inlaid in gold upon the casket's ivory facade, each appearing to have been hand-detailed within perfectly circular outlines. Such commitment to mathematical perfection most likely stems from its origins in the Muslim community in Norman Sicily. During the medieval period, scholars in the Middle East made several foundational achievements in mathematics that shaped culture and art throughout the Islamic world. Muslim scholars made a coordinated effort to collect, preserve, and translate numerous works of Greek antiquity. Such works, including the mathematical innovations of Euclid and Archimedes, were compiled at the famous Baghdad House of Wisdom. Using this vast store of knowledge, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi invented the decimal point and introduced base 10 numerals, first used in India, to the wider world. And Omar Khayyam introduced a whole field of geometric and mathematical concepts that we know today as algebra, a word that is Arabic in origin. All these innovations had a distinct influence on contemporary culture. Medieval Islamic art and architecture is known for its symmetry and use of geometric concepts to create an abstract and visually pleasing spectacle. Repeating patterns, such as the gilded circular design on the casket, are typical of this manner of design. Islamic tradition is often interpreted to include aniconism, the prohibition of depicting human or otherwise sentient beings in visual art, hence the ornate and artistic, yet distinctly non-figurative decoration of our ivory casket. The Islamic artistic motifs offer useful evidence for determining the casket's origins, as Perry Cott explains in his essay, Siculo-Arabic Ivories in the Museo Cristiano.
All these motives are of Eastern origin, chiefly Persian, and thus we are forced to conclude that the artisans who made these objects were Eastern, and that they employed indigenous decorative forms which, in the process of execution, were subject to the influence of Western methods of decoration.
The clear presence of Islamic styling on a casket made in Sicily is evidence of the interconnected nature of medieval societies. Though it is currently part of Italy, rulership of Sicily changed hands multiple times throughout history. The Muslim conquest of the island from the Byzantine Empire began in the mid-9th century and took over 100 years to fully complete. 100 years after that, the Normans took over, but the large Muslim population persisted and thrived under the rule of the Christian Normans. In fact, the Andalusian travel Ibn Jubayr, one of the most notable sources we have on this period, chronicles how the Norman Count Roger II actively encouraged the beautiful craftsmanship of his Muslim subjects. Such patronage is understandable, as the production of luxury goods, such as our dear friend the ivory casket, generated wealth and prestige for the young Sicilian state. It is here we see one of the great values of this casket as a historical artifact. It is emblematic of the highly interconnected world of the medieval Mediterranean. Here we have a luxury item produced by Muslims on an island with long-standing Greek and Italian cultural heritage, which was ruled at the time by descendants of Viking invaders. All this, however, barely scratches the surface of what this casket can tell us about the richly interconnected medieval world of its birth. In order to know more, we must examine the construction of the casket itself and turn our attention below the Mediterranean's southern shore. The two primary components of the casket's construction are ivory and gold. both luxury commodities, neither of which are native to Sicily. This small box began its life deep within the heart of Africa, specifically the Sahel region, a geographic transition point between the Sahara to the north and the Savannah to the south. Here, in Central and West Africa, sprawling medieval kingdoms produced vast quantities of gold and ivory. From there, merchant caravans transported their goods across the desert and sold them to the wider world. It was in this manner that the Muslim Sicilian craftsmen purchased the gold and ivory to build the casket. As a nexus point of trade in the Mediterranean, Sicily maintained a particularly vital relationship with the Sahel merchants. After crossing the Sahara Desert, gold and ivory were shipped to Sicily, often through the port of Mahdia in modern-day Tunisia. Mahdia, however, as well as the African province surrounding it, was under Muslim control. If the Sicilians were to capture that segment of the African coast, they could have controlled a far greater portion of trade. Conquering North Africa was a perpetual ambition of the Normans. Roger I, the very first Count of Sicily, openly planned for eventual conquest, quoted as saying, "As far as we are concerned, Africa is always there. When we are strong, we will take it." Other Mediterranean powers, such as Pisa and Genoa, also aspired to conquer Mahdia, sometimes by proposing alliances with Sicily. In his book, The Crown and the Economy under Roger II and his successors, David of Alafia quotes how Roger rejected these offers for pragmatic, non-religious reasons.
Then Roger assembled his companions and asked for their advice. They replied, "By the gospel! It would be an excellent plan, and all these lands would become Christian." Roger lifted his foot and gave a loud fart. He said, "By my faith, here is far better counsel than you have given." "How?" they replied. He said, "When the Franks are here, many misfortunes will befall me. I shall have to provide a fleet to transport them across Africa, and also to send troops of my own. Suppose they conquer the land and become masters of it. Then commerce in foodstuffs will pass from Sicilian hands to theirs. Meanwhile, we shall have to send them provisions from Sicily, and I shall lose to them the money I draw each year from sale of my produce. And if instead the expedition were unsuccessful, they would return to Sicily and cause me trouble."
His son and successor, Roger II, tried to conquer Africa himself during the mid-12th century, wresting control of Mahdia and the surrounding lands for a period of time. Roger died in 1154, having declared himself Rex Africae, King of Africa. Unfortunately for the Normans, just 6 years later, the Islamic Berbers of the Almohad Caliphate conquered the territory. Though enmity remains between the Almohads and the Sicilians, the trade in gold, ivory, and other luxuries was too profitable to abandon. Following the signing of a peace treaty in 1180, trade continued between the two powers of the central Mediterranean, and they even cooperated to some degree on combating piracy and opposing the rise of the Ayyubids in Egypt. Although the lens of religion is an important tool to understand the medieval world, it was often the vast and secular flow of commerce that dictated the behavior of people and states alike. Dr. Jonathan Ray, professor of religious studies and specialist in medieval Jewish history at Georgetown University, discusses this trend.
I would say in a short run, yes, there are battles, there are purges, there are moments of military conflict that can disrupt trade seriously, but they're always short term. In the long term, the markets always press in, and these rulers sometimes need to, attack people in order to come to power. But once they're in power, the people they used to attack are now sources either for goods or to sell their goods to. And so very often, if you're going to stay in power for a long period of time, you have to put aside the violence and to keep the wheels of commerce a moving,
Just as the goods used in the casket's construction flowed throughout the medieval world, so too did its cultures and transitions of origin intersect and intertwine. Here we can get an idea of the object's specific purpose. Contemporary studies of Siculo-Arabic ivory caskets, around 50 of which are known to be in existence, suggest they were often given as wedding presents. Many of the casket's decorations are in line with this purpose, such as the faded Arabic writing on the rim, which reads, "May glory endure," likely alluding to the enduring power of love. What is absent on this wedding gift, however, are any explicit references to religion, which also may seem odd to those of us who originate from or who study cultures in which religion and marriage are inseparable institutions. Though the people of the medieval Mediterranean, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or otherwise, were generally deeply pious, there was, at the time, a sort of gentle decoupling between the ideas of love and religion. According to Dr. Jonathan Ray, this was because nearly every great society of the age, the Islamic Caliphates, the Holy Roman Empire, the Byzantines, and, yes, the Sicilians, deliberately styled themselves as the natural successor to the Roman Empire, and, as such, adopted more liberal views of love expressed in the Greek and Roman classics.
So a lot of the shared culture of the region is, I don't want to say warmed over, but an homage to Greek and Roman culture about this. And very often they'll say, no matter what people tell you, our religion isn't against romantic love. So it gives you the sense, well, some people were saying that romantic love is problematic. So when they come out and they say, no, 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 this isn't true, that Greek and Roman position on love is being brought against perhaps newer, monotheistic, more pious versions of erotic love, homoerotic love, homosocial love. And very often these writers are hearkening back to a sort of pre-Christian, pre-Muslim moment in which they say, well, our ancestors, our Greeks and Romans said this wasn't so bad, so maybe we should rethink this.
On one end of the box is another gold inlay design, this time of two peacocks gazing at each other with necks entwined. The peacock is a recurring motif throughout Islamic art, particularly of the type originating in Persia. This Persian influence in Mediterranean art once again demonstrates the interconnectedness of the medieval Islamic world. The peacock is beyond a simple motif, however. In the Persian tradition, the peacock is a symbol of princes and is often described as a bird of paradise. The presence of a peacock motif on this casket suggests it was a gift of great value given to someone of high class. The curious bit about this particular design is the entwining of the two peacocks' necks. This is not unique among peacock-related imagery. It is generally taken to portray love, a reasonable addition to a wedding gift. One may note, however, that all peacocks are male. Female peafowl, peahens, are distinctly less elaborately feathered. It is not currently known whether this design is any indication of homosexual relations between gifter and giftee. Though the medieval religious establishment had strict rules against such relations, historians tend to find ample evidence of gay relationships among the wealthy upper classes, who generally had more freedom to deviate from the accepted social norms. Poetry from the era, for example, tends to be rife with innuendo alluding to same-sex relationships. However, the casket was most likely a wedding present, and it is a stretch to imagine homosexuality being expressed in such a formal setting. It is possible that the casket's craftsmen simply decided that peacocks were more aesthetically pleasing than peahens and made both male due to the aforementioned desire for symmetry prevalent in Islamic art. At present, the true nature of the twin peacocks remains a mystery. But, after all, what would history be without the promise of further study, without ever more secrets waiting to be uncovered?